All right, welcome to the latest episode of the Colman Power podcast. So, in this week's show, even before I get to that, I just want to say for each and everybody of the new listeners, welcome to the show. If you're a long time listener, welcome back. Just want to say thanks. Not enough people actually say thanks anymore. I do any ads, don't have any promos at this moment in time. But this episode, I'm going to go straight on into it, is about incomplete proteins. Proteins, firstly, in importance in the diet, and incomplete proteins. So straight away, a lot of people that I'm training and mentoring and coaching ask the question about how much protein should I be consuming. I suppose protein bars and supplements that I recommend, or do I recommend in fact, and as well as that, how can it help in the overall grand scheme of things for weight loss, and is all protein created equally? Those are a couple of the different topics we'll be covering in this week's show. So straight on in, what is protein? Protein is something that it's the building blocks of skin, cells, organs, and one of your largest organs is the likes of your skin. So for optimal health, okay, it is so important for you to consume protein foods. And I'll be touching on incomplete proteins first, because what they are and what protein, complete protein is contains all 9 essential amino acids. But the incomplete proteins mean that it's missing one of the major components to make it and have all the essential. What I mean by essential is we have to consume from our diet. So getting on to the likes of what protein, the benefits of it are, it has that thermogenic effect. Okay, what it means is as that food is being digested, it burns and uses up calories. How advantageous is that? Unbelievable. Winning if you're on a protein food source. Next thing, it regulates hormones. I don't know why my laptop is making that beeping sound. It's plugged in, thank God, it's happened before, and it turned off completely. It was an awful upset in the middle of a podcast. And the next thing, and the final main advantage of it, is it keeps you fuller for longer. Most people, as soon as I start training them on the organic fitness program, they realize they're under-eating foods, and it's typically not the under-eating carbohydrates. Most people eat their carbohydrates. It's not healthy fats. It's not fats, and it's definitely not healthy fats. And it's protein being the main cause of cravings. And cravings are not natural. They shouldn't happen. And if you have cravings, it's a direct result that something is not right in your diet. And the other thing then I would highly recommend you to bump up is magnesium. So magnesium and protein. And when we're eating foods, I make them balanced, and that you have veggies in there too. That most certainly will help you to prevent cravings, which most people, nobody wants cravings. I take a drink during my podcast. Why? Because the 30 odd minutes that I do record these for, it's a long time if you're not taking a drink. And getting back to, I suppose, just touching on incomplete proteins. Examples of those are typically plant-based sources. So you have the likes of your lentils, extremely high in protein. However, they're missing one of the main essential proteins that are needed to make it a complete protein. However, you can combine it with the likes of beans or lentils to make it a complete protein, because them in itself, peas, beans, seeds, whether it be chickpeas, whether it be black beans, whether it be kidney beans, all those do have a certain amount of, remember, protein. However, they do contain carbohydrates as well. So whether people are having their breakfast and they typically think off the bat, do you know what will I add into my breakfast to bump up the protein content? Some people will think, oh, because it's on the likes of the packaging, either it be crunchy or smooth, contains protein. Nuts do contain protein, but in fact, they contain higher amount of fats in the likes of those items that I've just listed, whether it be almonds, whether it be pumpkin seeds, whether it be flax seeds. Those are things that do have higher amount of fats. And just to touch on what actually are the macro breakdown for proteins, fats, and carbs. So protein contains 9 kilocalories per gram, while fats contain 9 kilocalories per gram. And carbohydrates are the exact same as proteins, so that's 4 kilocalories per gram. That's worth noting, that's worth writing down. Carbs and protein have the same amount of calories per gram, per gram. And then as a result of that, then you have fats were just over double with 9 kilocalories. And when I train people, I always get them to focus in on their protein sources. Why? Because as the main breadwinner, we have the thermogenic effect, preventing cravings. When you have less cravings, you are better able to, we call it, stick to eating single ingredient foods and finding out then what foods suit you. And that is very important. And when you notice that you have much more satiating in your foods, you can enjoy life a hell of a lot better. From going to events, focusing on always trying to get whatever it is. I recommend people to try aim for at least 30 grams of protein, depending on whether it's when if you have 3 main meals a day, I highly recommend you to at least have 30 grams of protein. But how do you hit that? Okay, focusing in on the next thing we want to touch on is complete proteins. Complete proteins contain and are listed in typically chicken, fish, turkey, eggs. If you eat those, that's absolutely fine. If you don't, that's just, and cheese and yogurt to be topped in there too. Trying to get to a single ingredient is most important. Why? Because then you don't have the thought that what other foods are coming into it, causing issues with added carbs or added fats or added sugars as a result of that. And sugars fall into the category of carbohydrates anyway. And then it's the plant-based sources that are still a complete protein. You have tofu and tempeh, bulgur wheat, hemp seeds, all things I highly recommend. And if I'm recommending foods, I typically recommend those first, even tofu, tempeh, hemp seeds, and bulgur wheat and quinoa are things definitely to add into your diet. Just due to the fact that they have the protein and they have fiber, which meat sources don't have. I am not anti-meat, I'm not anti-fish, I'm not an anti. I'm telling you that that's another thing that keeps you fuller for longer. If you are looking to lose weight and tone up, I highly recommend you and improve your overall health. You need fiber in your diet. And what fiber does, it feeds microorganisms in your stomach. And what they do is there's so many different benefits to improve gut health. It's the fact that they can increase, we'll call it, the foods being broken down, which then inevitably give you more vitamins and minerals in your body so you can have more energy levels, as well as the fact that fiber is something that feeds your microorganisms. Not only that, it produces your gut microorganisms 90% of your serotonin. You want to be healthier and happier, most certainly add in the likes of high fibrous foods that have protein. That's tofu and tempeh. But remember, not all protein sources are created equally. So when you are choosing, I suppose, those plant-based sources, they can be marinated, they can have added sugar in them. So this is where it comes, I suppose, into its most importance when you're reading and able to read food labels. Turning around the packets of foods and seeing its ingredients list. So with the likes of tofu, it can be made from a soya bean, okay, and tempeh made from a soya bean as well. Those items are most certainly best when they are just simply tofu 100% written on the back of it. Just like when you look at an egg, what's the ingredients of an egg? There's no even, that's the best protein source in my personal opinion. Why? Because there's no additives, added any sugar, anything other than what the chicken has produced. So with the likes of, I suppose, slightly more processed foods, and processed can be beneficial towards getting it to, I suppose, ourselves in a more beneficial form, and that being from the tempeh. Tempeh is fermented. Again, things that are fermented, I've touched on in several podcasts. Fermented foods, again, improve your gut health. And when you get it from tofu or tempeh, you have fiber, you have protein, and your fermentation of the food, which is beneficial towards your gut again. But if you are choosing the likes of tofu that's marinated, it's absolutely fine. Just remember that it's something that bumps up your carbohydrates. And if you're looking to lose weight and if you have excessive amount of carbohydrates, which this is the thing, it's not the carbohydrates are bad. I've never ever mentioned carbohydrates being bad. It's the fact that it's not essential for the body to run, because we'll touch on the body can run off fats and it can run off proteins. There's no essential carbohydrates. There's essential amino acids and there's essential healthy fats you have to consume from your diet. But remember that you do need carbohydrates in your diet from whole foods, which I recommend, from complex carbohydrates. And that's, I suppose, something that when you're looking to lose weight, having carbohydrates are typically on the lower spectrum so that you can help yourself tap in. So when you want to lose weight, you need to have your carbohydrates slightly lower than if you were just trying to maintain your current weight. Why? Because I recommend having carbs at insulin sensitive times. That's typically first thing in the morning and after your workout. So your body can use them as direct fuel source and not store them as body fat. So when I train people, I get them to understand foods a little bit better. So tracking foods is something that I recommend. I've done it in the past, but now that when I've learned what foods contain what, 100 grams of tofu or tempeh is first tofu. Tofu is 13 grams. And how do I know what that looks like? I weighed it a couple of times and then I know what it looks like in a bowl or a pan. So then I know visually, and as well as that, the fist is a good indication. Your fist, clench your fist, about that is 100 grams, roughly estimate. God damn it. It's the whole idea of you don't have to have it exactly. And that's tofu, 13 grams of protein for tofu. Tempeh, next protein source. You can write these down, or people that are watching on YouTube, quite visual with my hands. Tempeh is the next protein source I can highly recommend you to have. That is something, 100 grams of it will go, because that's typically a serving size, but you can bump that up. Remember, if you had 200 grams of it, you just double the figure. So tempeh being the next one, it's 18 grams of protein. There we go. That's why I recommend tempeh a little bit higher on the recommendation list for people that are going plant-based. And then you're following 100 grams of a meat source. Again, it could be chicken, could be beef, could be chicken, fish, turkey. And those, again, are slightly higher. They range from 20 to 25. And it then most certainly is, again, if I haven't touched on this, to get these sources local, to get them fresh, to get them organic. So those are between 20 and 25 grams of protein. And an egg is an egg, but typically a large egg is about 6 to 7 grams of protein. And those things I want you to do, I want you to add them up to get 1.5 to 2 grams of your overall intake of foods in a day. And how do you do that? You can use an app. I typically recommend people maybe use an app so that you can understand what protein, fats, and carbs that you need on a direct day-to-day activity. So in that, it tells you how, it asks you the question of what's your current height, what's your current weight, what's your job, and whether you get 10,000 steps and your training. Those are the things that are very important. Matching foods to your activity levels, because if you are, I'm going to tell you, training, you most certainly need your protein at 1.5, if not 2 grams of protein, with added weight, as they recommend, for the main fact that this is matching foods to your activity level. It'll tell you how much fats to consume as well, and it'll tell you how much carbohydrates to eat on a regular basis. And you can alter those. You can bump up your fats, you can bump up your protein, you can reduce down your carbohydrates or bring those up on other days, and that's called carb cycling, and that's for, I suppose, more advanced people. But remember, the most simplest thing you can do is just note that what protein you're getting in a meal, because we don't go to people's house and go, you know what, how much was in that piece of chicken? It was 100 grams. Colman told me I needed 100 grams. I need 30. I need 30 grams of protein in my meals. Will this hit 30? So don't be stressing over it. I must recommend that you just have an understanding that fist size. And if the chicken is cut up just roughly, again, try and estimate. Put it together on the side of the plate. No. What I need you to do is get comfortable with foods and find foods that work for you. The majority of the time, I do my own cooking, and that's what I recommend. Why? Because there's a whole idea of it building up natural sensations in your stomach, preparing you for the food that's coming into your body. That's another thing we've lost total touch with. Now, mind where foods come from as well is another point. The fact is that we're not cooking our own meals that we used to previously do, and there's a reason why. It's another reason why we're getting heavier and heavier, and we're coming below par for optimal health. In my personal opinion, is we've lost that connection with food. We're not cooking with family. We're not eating with friends anymore. We're just going out and we're getting these chips on the go and these processed foods, and that's not serving not only you but the people that you surround yourself with. Because if you're not eating right, you won't be feeling right, and as a result of that, negativity will inevitably come out. And I'm a positive man as well, and that's due down to the fact that things that I do to benefit myself and the people I contact and the people that I mentor and I coach. I want people to be healthier. I want people to be happier, and that starts with the foods that you eat from the moment you get up. I typically recommend protein sources, either complete or incomplete. And for vegans or vegetarians, the incomplete protein source sometimes that gets thrown around is even broccoli or kale has a certain amount of protein. That's an incomplete protein source. That 100 grams of that is about 2 grams of protein. So if you're relying on, I suppose, greens to get your protein sources, it can bump you up. It certainly can. And mushrooms actually is another good one to add in to a meal. It's putting those foods together. So even I'll just give you an example of how to hit, we'll say 30 grams of protein or 35 grams of protein in a main meal. So you can have tempeh. We'll have 100 grams of tempeh. We'll have 100 grams of beans. So 100 grams of tempeh is 18 grams of protein. You can write this down, 18 grams of protein. Then we can have 100 grams of beans. We'll go kidney beans, about 100 grams of that. I know these off the top of my head because I've done it so many times and helped people to understand this too. But 7 grams of protein. So 18 and 7. So don't do maths live, is that what they say? So 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. We're on 23. Hemp seeds, 15 grams of that is 6 grams of protein. So 26, we're over the 30 now already. As a result of that, we can sprinkle in some pumpkin seeds, which is helping you bump up your healthy fats, and adding in greens. We'll add in 100 grams of greens. There we go. Sprinkle those in, stir fry, bish, bash, bosh, putting in veg stock. There is, and putting in what other vegetables? Onions and garlic. Like, don't be worried about the calories of that. If you're tracking foods at all, that's flavor. So then if you didn't like veg stock, didn't have veg stock, put in curry powder. That's a meal that you can cook in less than 10 minutes. And it has complete protein sources. It has healthy fats in the seeds. It has flavor. It has onions, garlic, which are naturally high in a type of fiber called inulin, good for your gut health. These are simple meals that I want you to have. You can cook that up for, and if you want it, I'm cooking just for myself. Double the amount. You cook it for 3 people. 3 times the amount. They're called treble, and fiblet. Whatever amount of people is it, just bump up the amount of the volume of the food that you have in that main meal. That is the most simplest meal I can cook in under 10 minutes. And that could be used for any other protein source as well. And if you wanted to add in cheese to that, or if you do eat cheese, you could be bumping it way on up, bumping it into closer to 40. And then if you wanted a little piece of, we'll call it chicken in there too, or if you had a meat source, or if you had a fish, bish, bash, bosh, that's driving up, focusing on protein first, then the carbs will come inevitably, because you're typically having either porridge for breakfast, or you're having brown bread, sourdough bread, all things I highly recommend. Other foods that contain carbohydrates that I would get people to eat are potatoes, sweet potatoes, and don't be worried, boiled potatoes don't make you fat. In fact, they're delicious, and I have them bish, bash, bash. I grow them, and I recommend definitely to get those things organically, most certainly. And then going on to, I suppose, foods that I highly recommend to get organically, most certainly tofu and tempeh, just due to the fact they're typically grown in poorer countries. And as a result of that, if you remember on a separate podcast, if you haven't listened to it, GMO seeds are seeds that have been genetically modified to be able to tolerate sprays such as glyphosate. Glyphosate is a carcinogenic, and right now there are countries throughout Europe trying to, I suppose, eliminate that in their production of food, which I am all for, because why? It's carcinogenic. That's been proven. Whether people believe, I suppose, that cancer is increasing due to the food consumption or because of toxic fumes in the air, the whole idea of it is food is and can be medicine, but make sure not all food is created equally. And that goes for, I suppose, with meat sources as well. And the fact that if you get things organically, they shouldn't be cheap, because food is so hard to produce. If you've ever grown anything yourself, if you ever visited a farm, family members or connection with it, it's difficult. It's hard work. The plants, the animals don't know it's your birthday, don't know it's the weekend. They don't take bank holidays off either. The whole idea of it is, whether it's midsummer, it's sun is splitting the rocks, they still have to be fed. They still have to be cared for and looked after. And it's a lot of work and it's a lot of hard effort. And for people to expect it for cheap or buttons, it shouldn't be. It should never be that way. You try even grow something, you try look after an animal, whether it be chickens, and even if you're out in the country, I highly recommend that, just for, I suppose, the fact that free range and pasture raised and organic eggs are my most favorite thing I could possibly consume. Again, because they're quick. I need foods that are quick, that are high protein, and that hit the spot for me. And that's really, I suppose, what I was wanted to touch on in relation to incomplete and complete protein sources. And then often asked, I suppose, by myself is protein bars versus supplements. My preference on protein bars is I would never big into them. Firstly, because I suppose when I was growing up, my mom being and my dad being psychiatric nurses, I wasn't allowed protein bars, and I would lived at home for too long. I suppose they were right. They were, I suppose, they're country individuals. I'm from Waterford originally, based here in West Cork at the minute. They knew that something wasn't right, and now that I know I had a lot more about food, they weren't too far wrong. It's the thing that protein bars, they do contain and can contain, firstly, sugar, which is a carbohydrate, which you don't want to have excessive amount in, can increase your insulin, and following that, it causes a spike in your blood sugar levels, and what goes up must come down. After that, there's cravings involved in it. So I don't recommend that towards getting your protein source. You can eat them. If you do eat them, if you're stuck, you're outside, you're going for walks, and somebody offered you a protein bar, and you said, "Geez, Colman said I couldn't have a protein bar, so I'll starve to death." No, it does and can help you hit your protein targets. 1.5 to 2 grams per kg is what I recommend for hitting your goal, especially if you're training. But it's kind of like having negative effects. I always try maximize the benefits of the things that I do. And there are better protein bars than others. They're not all created equally. And it's trying to get, if you do read labels, having protein bars that are closer to, I suppose, minimal ingredients. And I do recommend plant-based sources of protein bars over dairy, just due to the fact that I don't know of too many organic protein bars, and a lot of times dairy is inflammatory. That means it can cause inflammation in the body. Inflammation causes swelling. Swelling at an excessive amount, at an acute level, can cause spots on your face. That's why I suppose I don't tolerate a lot of dairy. I don't have a huge amount of dairy in my diet. Cottage cheese may be in there on and off, just due to that I like it, and it's something that I can get and grab on the go. Yogurts is another one, and you can also I typically lean towards maybe a soya yogurt, which is a complete protein. There we go. And what also is important, that it's something that suits you. But touching back on that, inflammation. So inflammation at a small level can cause spots. I typically get spots in and around my nose, on my forehead, when I do have excessive amount of dairy, and sometimes on the front of my legs. And with other people, it can cause inflammation in their acne. And when people have poor skin health, it's something I definitely look into, reducing down their foods that cause inflammation. Foods that are high in anti-inflammatory properties are all different vegetables, which I always recommend to people. And dark leafy greens and purple color foods are super for anti-inflammation in the body. So that's worth noting. With protein bars, it's something that can help you hit your protein targets. I don't recommend them, but if you are having a protein bar, I even recommend you making your own from, I suppose, a plant-based protein source. Having oats, making it a balanced bar, having oats, which is a complex carbohydrate, having some nuts and seeds, whether it be hemp seeds, whether it be pumpkin seeds. You can put in flax seeds. I love those. They're high in fiber as well. Fiber protein, lads, healthy fats from single ingredients from organic produce is what I'm recommending to you. And then do you have your proteins, your fats, and your carbs? You can put those, mash them all together with a banana, put in maybe some raisins, organic raisins or goji berries, pop those in the oven, take them out then, 40 minutes later, bish, bash, bash, and have that. That's absolutely free on my Instagram channel if you want to check that out. It's something that I have when I travel or walk and do site visits or organic mentoring and coaching that I do down in people's back gardens and their polytunnels or their veg patches. And those are things I want people to incorporate into their lifestyle. Plan your foods, because it's just like, I suppose, your life. You don't randomly, or your job, even the fact you don't randomly just get up in the morning and go into work and go, God, what am I going to do today? And if you live your life, I suppose, in relation to doing that with your foods, you'll do things at random. And you do things at random, you get a random result. I know roughly the breakfast that I'm going to have, and I tell you, it's typically either savory oats at the weekend, because I get a little bit creative, or overnight oats during the week when I don't have as much time on my hands. Steeping the thing overnight, putting in, I suppose, either a protein supplement, could be either 20 grams of protein, which is actually a complete protein source that I recommend as well. On top of that, you can have your hemp seeds, which are bumping up again my healthy fats and my protein. And then that's a balanced meal: proteins, fats in the nuts and seeds, and carbohydrates in my oats, Flavin's organic oats. Next point then is my lunch. I have a salad type lunch, bumping it up to tofu or tempeh. I like a salad type lunch, and if it's a salad, just doesn't mean it's salad on its own. Then again, I'm definitely getting in either hemp seeds in there. Major fan of those, because why? It helps me have at least one meal a day that doesn't contain a meat source. And I'm not anti-meat, as I said. It's just easier to digest than, I suppose, most meat sources. I mean, easier to digest foods, your body's running it better. You've less bloating. Nobody likes bloating. That's another reason to go for a meal of the day that doesn't contain meat. Fish is easier to digest, especially white fish in particular. And I'm not leaning towards salmon, because salmon is typically farmed to get it wild. Those are really good points. But remember, all those things are complete protein: fish, tofu, and tempeh in your salad type lunch. And then in the evening, I typically would lean towards, I go last night, it was mackerel. I had potatoes, and I had chard with extra virgin olive oil, again ticking all the boxes. And I had yogurt, soy yogurt, 2 kiwis before bed. And that's just a typical, that's yesterday's meal. It's done and dusted for you, and that's hitting my recommended protein targets. And as a result of that, I don't know what the carbs were. I just focus in on protein right now, and I'm focusing on getting whole foods, vegetables, different colors, and that's helping me hit exactly my protein target. And either the final point that I'm going to either touch on now is supplement. I do recommend people to use supplements after they have whole foods. Add in chicken, fish, turkey, eggs. There's your complete protein source. You got cheese if you have it too, if you tolerate dairy. You can go yogurt. They have beneficial lactobacillus, which are again good for your gut health. I'm always going to be thinking back there. Oh, food is so linked. Eat foods, eat vegetables. And then I suppose the next thing is having incomplete proteins that can make complete protein sources as a result of that. If you didn't have, we'll call it tofu or tempeh for your salad type lunch, you can have lentils. Lentils, you can be chickpeas, or you can have nuts and seeds that make a complete protein. And this is another handy one. Sometimes people ask me, Colman, what supplements do you take for energy levels? I don't take any magnesium tablets. I don't take any iron tablets. I don't take any major of those multivitamins, because every vitamin and mineral is found in whole foods. When you realize that, you could feel satiated and get those vitamins and minerals into your diet. And people will say, how come it's a little more expensive? I would rather pay right now a little bit more for some whole foods, where there's some kale, iron, vitamin C, magnesium, bish bash bosh. It's in season. Get your hands on it. It's delicious. Put it in a stir fry. Any of those salad type lunches I was talking about, or put it in with your fish if you eat fish, or if you eat chicken. Just make sure you get those organic, because you're taking away the hormones, and as a result of that, you're getting better bang for your buck. And it's not only beneficial for you, it's also beneficial for the environment. And when you get it local, you're supporting the lads that are busting their ass to produce something for you. Support them, lads. Support yourself. Eat the best food you possibly can afford. And that's, I suppose, my preference on whole foods and people trying to live a happier and healthier life, eating the best foods that suit them. You choose the diet that suits you. Don't pick a diet. Understand foods before you pick a diet. And as a result of that, matching it to your activity levels. If you want to, remember, we'll go over a couple of different points. Advantages of protein. It's thermogenic. It burns calories as it's being digested. It regulates your hormones. It is the same kilocalories as carbohydrates. Remember, and then that you have incomplete protein sources. You have plant-based, we have lentils, we have beans, grains, you have broccoli if you want to throw those in there, and kale, all different vegetables. Then you have complete protein sources: chicken, fish, turkey, eggs, cheeses, yogurt, soya and dairy are all fall into those categories. And then if I'm recommending people to, I suppose, track foods, hit 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kg if you are currently training, which I highly recommend you to do if you listen to this podcast. And get these foods local, get these foods organic, and understand reading the backs of the labels is important if you want to know what type of food and what things are going into your body. Right, I suppose that is a full episode on the likes of complete proteins, its benefits for you, for your skin health, and skin being one of the most important things, and most important things for your optimal health. Why? Because it's one of the first things that people look at when they see it, your skin. And I suppose we'll be doing separate episodes on how to improve your skin health. But just want to say, really appreciate anybody who's listening to this podcast right now. And thanks, whether you're checking out, I want to check out my social media platforms. You have Colman Power on TikTok. That's a lot of fun. Check that out. You have Colman Power Organic Fitness on Instagram, Facebook, and even send me a message on Instagram and let me know what you thought. If you give me a review or 5-star rating, that really helps get the podcast out to more individuals on, I suppose, different platforms. So as always in these shows, stay tuned, stay classy, and keep it organic. Enjoy the summer.